y'all, and welcome to the Healthy by Heather Brown podcast, where I encourage you in healthy mind, body, and spirit through my Sunday reset. Let's get into it. Hello, girl gang, and welcome back to another episode of Healthy by Heather Brown. I'm so thrilled to have you on today, and I think that you're really going to leave encouraged. Today's topic is actually something that you guys have requested, and that is, we talk a lot about younger kids, but we haven't talked as much about what it looks like to raise teens for Christ in a secular age. And so a lot of you guys have requested that. And you've also talked about what it looks like to raise children in a dark and scary world. And so I get to tackle that today with my new friend, Melissa Kruger. She is the Vice President of Discipleship Programming at the Gospel Coalition. And she has a new book, which is how I knew she had to come on air, because it's basically titled What You Guys Wanted to Hear About, which is Parenting with Hope, Raising Teens for Christ in a Secular Age. So with all that said, I get to invite in Melissa today. Hey, Melissa, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
You're so very welcome. We are honored to have you as a guest today. And I feel like this is probably a super simple thing, but sometimes people have never heard of the Gospel Coalition. And then other people, it's like, yeah, I mean, I've heard about that since I was a little girl. So what is the Gospel Coalition?
That is a great question that is sometimes complicated to answer. The Gospel Coalition started about 20 years ago with about 40 pastors. So it started with a council of pastors, and they wanted to really unify around the gospel. And even though they were from multiple denominations, they wanted to say, hey, what unites us is much greater than what divides us. And then this little thing called the internet really blew up, and they had started online resourcing really early. And so a lot of people know about the Gospel Coalition through the website. So we have a large website. It's really amazing what's on there. A lot of people think of it just as articles, but we actually have full commentaries. Any book of the Bible that you're doing a Bible study on or want to study, like if you need to study Ephesians, you can go in and type in Ephesians, and you can find all these resources from great commentators, maps, articles, podcasts, all the things that you might want to learn about that book are just sitting there, and they're all free. And so we have a lot of other things. We have conferences, we have cohorts, we have all these things going on, but most people come to us initially through our website.
Wow, that's amazing. I did not know that. So that's really cool. My Bible study group is actually about to start going through Matthew. So I was kind of thinking about, how I wanted to get my background in historical information and or finding podcasts. So I'm like, to know that there's somebody that's already done the work of compiling it all for me, that's huge. So thanks for sharing that. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's really amazing what's on there.
Yes. Now, I know that you just wrote a new book, and I love the title. Immediately hooked me in, like I said in your introduction. So tell us a little bit about how old your kids are and what made you want to write a book about raising teens in, a struggling world.
I know. Sometimes you write the book that you wish you had. So I had an earlier book called Walking with God in the Season of Motherhood. And that I kind of wrote because as a young mom, I so desperately just wanted a Bible study that helped me intersect, who I was as a mom with reading the Bible, but I needed it to be from that perspective. So that was and I actually wrote that one for a friend who was having her first baby, and she had babysat for me and all these things. So anyway, that's where that one came from. And so this one, as I was exiting the teen years, I'm still actually in them. I have a 23-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 17-year-old. And what I realized the first time around, if I hadn't written that book then, I wouldn't be able to write it now because I don't remember. So I felt like right as I exit a season, it's really helpful to write on it, because the other problem with teens and different things, everything's changing. If I'd written this book 10 years ago, even, cell phones weren't a thing. Smartphones weren't a thing. And so there wasn't a book for me on how do I deal with these smartphones, or how do I deal with the crazy sports culture we're living in. Teenage years are really evolving constantly as what's the new thing. And so as I'm leaving this kind of season, I wanted to look back and write on it. I loved the teen years. I taught high school kids.
Oh.
So what I did realize was some of what I had learned about teen development was really helpful and impactful for me as a parent. And I think we do a lot of that with 2-year-olds. We don't do a lot of that with 12-year-olds. And they need us to understand that they're not just becoming adults. They're not adults yet. They actually have different needs than we do. Just like you don't expect, your 2-year-old to be able to say a sentence correctly every time because they're verbally developing. So teens are still developing. And so how do we live compassionately with them as we're parenting them towards growth, but understanding what their limitations are? I wanted to put that stuff in the book as well. So kind of a combination of all those things.
Well, that's incredible. You mentioned a little bit about how, technology is changing so much. And as a mom that's in the thick of it, I always think it's so fascinating to hear how other people set up their boundaries around phones and social media and the age they started. Do you mind unpacking that a little bit just from your research and then how it's practically played out? Because sometimes that can be two different things.
Absolutely. And here's the reality. For me, there was no research. So my daughter was born in 2000. So she literally, the trajectory of smartphone use and social media is really her age group.
Wow.
So there were no studies. When she was there, I didn't have smartphones when I was parenting young children. I never could hand my kid my phone because they'd be like, what's this device? You dialed numbers on it. That's all
Right.
it was. And I have to say, I'm super thankful for that, right? Like I never could sit at a restaurant and give my kid my phone and let them watch an episode of whatever show. It just wasn't an option. I mean, when you think back, that feels like, did I parent in the dark ages? That's what it sort of feels already. But what happened to my generation is at 12 and 13, what happened was I was done with my first smartphone. So guess what did I do? I gave it to my daughter because that was the easiest thing to do. I didn't even think, it was just a pragmatic, it's free. Let's just sign her up. And she needs a phone because I need to be able to reach her when she's at sports practice or whatever. So there was no thought given to that. It was just what was easy. And when she asked, can I get this little app called Instagram? It's brand new. It was a photo sharing app. I never gave one thought to what a heart like and get someone who gets 500 and someone who gets 10 might do to my kid's heart. Didn't even think about it. Or what it might do to her heart to see, wow, there was a whole party and I wasn't invited. Those things hadn't even risen to the surface at all yet. So we gave her a smartphone and we let her have Instagram. We weren't even thinking about these things, to be quite honest. So now
I want to say though that I hadn't even thought about it from your perspective. And I think that's such good perspective for other people to hear, because now I feel like we do have, like you're saying, a lot more information. We're learning, from parents like you that are like, hey, now that I know, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, it's really refreshing to hear, well, yeah, I can put myself in that same position and say, yeah, I want to save money. Yeah, this makes sense. I can totally see how you would not see all that was coming.
Yeah, I consider it kind of like the red M&Ms and like the cigarettes. Like everyone used to smoke. My high school that I went to was built with smoking. They had basically inside, they were outdoors, but you could get to it. It was an inner courtyard where people was for smoking.
Wow.
Yeah. And like by the time I was there, no one was allowed to smoke anymore, but you realize they used to let teenagers smoke in high school,
Right.
So we realize we all don't know what we don't know, right?
Exactly.
When these new things come around. And so I do think cell phones and social media will be like that one day. I think they'll be like, you had a cell phone in high school? Like, you got to take it to high school. I really do think with where the research is going, that's where we may find ourselves, but we're still in that murky middle where the research is coming to light. But the research on cell phones is not great on smartphones. Basically, every hour a kid spends on a smartphone, the less happy they are. That's just what the research is telling us. There's a great book called iGen, full of statistics and information. So I draw from a lot of that research.
You said iGen?
Yeah, it's iGen. I have it right here.
Oh, awesome. And don't worry, you guys, if you're listening to this, I'm going to link it up in the show notes down below as a resource.
It's iGen, why today's super connected kids are growing up less rebellious, more tolerant, less happy, and completely unprepared for adulthood. Gene Twenge, excellent book, has tons of statistics, tons of things about what's going on.
Thank you.
And the basic, the summation, not much good comes from it. And so even the fact that what she does say is like rates of premarital sex and things like that are down. But the reason is not because all these kids are looking at their Bible and deciding, oh, I want to live for Jesus. That's not the reason. It's because they're so glued to their cell phone that they don't have natural human relationships anymore. So it's like they're just staying at home, and it's not for good reasons. So we're starting to get that research now. But here's what I will say. This is why I'm hopeful. So that was my daughter. Totally ignorant mom. Here you go, whatever. But here's what happened to her at age 13. We had a guest preacher in, and he was preaching. He was not preaching on the ills of cell phone. No one was talking about cell phones or social media back then. He just preached a sermon on not wasting your life. Total normal run-of-the-mill sermon. Nothing like, oh, I was like, okay, great. Don't waste your life. Whatever. She got in the car and she goes, you know what, Mom? I'm going to delete Instagram. It's just a waste of my time. So this is what I always say. We can't know everything as parents. We can't know all the dangers. We can faithfully take our kids to church. We can faithfully teach them the word. We can faithfully be in prayer. And we really can parent with hope because we can trust that God knows and God can get to them through all these avenues, even when we have no idea the mistakes we might be making. So I'm really like, I look back on that and I'm like, huh. And then my other kids actually have not even asked to have social media. So they just haven't. I think part of it was her experience. And she was like, it's just a waste of time. And, with each of them, we would have had a conversation. My son was completely uninterested in his phone. Like he is literally a rocket scientist and he liked to blow things up in my backyard. So that was a whole nother teen thing to go through. But in some ways, I'd rather them be climbing trees and blowing things up than glued to their cell phone all day.
100%.
Part of it is, I really do believe this. If we give them something better, and I got to say this to moms, especially moms with boys, we've got to be less fearful. We got to let them climb trees. I mean, I gave my son a miter saw when he was 13. And I have to say, I had these images of him cutting his hand off the whole time. But he loved to build things. And that was his dream gift. And, I was a little bit scared. And for a couple of years, he could not work on that thing without telling me he was doing it. Yeah, there were rules around it. But I'm so glad because, when you are working with your hands, you cannot be glued to your cell phone. You cannot be playing video games. You are doing things. And so sometimes what I say to parents is we have to give them something better so they won't like the lesser things. Because honestly, being glued to your cell phone is a lesser thing. So if we can give them better things, that's going to combat it. But yeah, I would highly suggest as a parent of young kids, researching it and also being aware that if they see you glued to your phone, they are going to think that's where life is.
Exactly.
You're spending your life. And so our example is huge in this, for everything. So it's hard as a parent.
It really is. Eric and I feel like we get really good about it for a while. And then it's like you kind of slack off because something happens where you have to work that night or, something happens and you just backslide right back where you were. Yep. But we'll be like, no, we got to get back on it. And right now our thing is that when Eric comes home from work, he usually gets home about 5:30. Then our phones are basically put away until the kids go to bed. So that way they're seeing us as a family unit engaging. And obviously there are exceptions to the rules when he's working and on call and those kind of things. Life happens. But you're right. For the most part, we want them to see that example. You can get all your stuff done during the day. And I actually had another podcast guest on recently. His last name's Early, and he wrote a book about habits of the household to basically raise your kids up and, Jesus-like manner. And he was talking about how it's so important to tell your kids when you do have to use your phone, what you're doing. So that way they don't think they're not important. You're saying like, hey, I just want you to know I'm making dinner reservations for us for this Friday night. Won't that be so fun? So then they don't just think you're ignoring them for no good reason. And I thought that was a good tip.
That's right. Because, you might even be reading your Bible. This is why I'm like, just read your real Bible. But it is tough because I read a lot of news. And I can remember my dad every day when I got home, he was reading the newspaper. But I knew exactly what he was doing, and it does kind of matter, right? Like, I don't know, like you can see he's reading the newspaper. I knew what he was engaged in. Whereas when you're on your phone, you're like, are you scrolling? You just don't know what's going on.
Exactly. I so agree with that. Well, you talked some about how, you tackled it with your daughter once you kind of found out, then your sons weren't as interested, and I love that as a fellow boy mom. I mean, if they don't have homework to do, or if we don't have a soccer practice or something, I'm like, get outside. I don't care what you do, but we're not it. And also another big tip for us has been, we don't allow iPads except for on the weekends, again, unless there's a rare exception, because then they're not asking for it all the time, because it is so annoying when they ask all day, every day. So I'm like, well, is it the weekend? And don't ask me again, because I'm not going to answer that same question.
That's right. So. Yeah. One thing I did in the summers, I actually created coupons. They were 30-minute coupon, because didn't have iPad, but just to watch TV.
Yes.
and then they could just put the coupon in, go do their 30 minutes. But then I knew when their time was up. It's like, if you create a system, and again, I'm with you. It is patterns, not perfection. Patterns. What is the pattern of our household? Not do we always do it perfectly? You know, I mean, because sometimes you're going to be like, oh, we're going to watch a whole movie together as a family. Well, that just blew that. You have an hour and a half of screen time out the water or whatever. But it's just patterns, and it's togetherness versus, oh, everyone's on the screen for 5 hours a day, every day.
Yes. And we try to make it be where they are outside at least double the amount per day that they are watching on a screen. To me, that's a big deal.
That is so good.
Yeah, so good. If y'all haven't kept up with the 1,000 hours outside, it is fascinating. And it's not just for kids, it's for adults too. When we are outside, we do better. It's awesome.
I fully agree. I fully agree. And even this extends as they're even older. There are high rates of anxiety and, and things with kids. And so sometimes it's you tell your teen, hey, let's talk about this and let's go for a walk outside while we're doing it, because it helps them. I mean, you're helping them figure out how to deal with life.
Yes. So I want to talk with you a little bit about one thing that I keep hearing as a term, and I don't know if it's just in Christian circles or just in friend groups or, how widespread this is, but I keep hearing about how parents are talking about their kids are coming home from high school and they want to know, how was your day? Well, what's going on? Da, 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 da. And you get Stonewall. And so you don't really know what's going on. How are you, breaking down that communication barrier? But then the big word that I'm hearing amongst, faith believing people is that they feel like they're almost having to deprogram their kids from when they come home from government-based schools that are teaching things that are anti-biblical. But then they're like, I know I need to deprogram, and I've been able to before, but now my kids aren't opening up to me about what's happening. So do you mind just giving some tips? Because that's hard. That's hard stuff. And you've been through it, and I think we would all gain from your wisdom.
Yeah, that is tough. I mean, I will always say, try as best as you can to use humor. And I think this is particularly true with boys. Your girls normally will keep talking to you. The stonewalling, I think, often comes from the boys, and it still continues. But I mean, like with my son, he would get in the car. How was your day? And I would just be like, I do not speak grunt. Can you interpret that for me? And he would always then laugh a little bit. And he still wouldn't tell me much. And so here's what I found. Often when I am asking the question is not the time they're ready to give the answer. But he would always come into my room at like 10:30 when I was ready to go to bed, and he would just start chit-chatting with me. So I think that the reality for us as parents of teens is creating space to be available when they're ready. Yeah. And it's a little tougher because at 10:30 you're tired and you want to go to bed. And so it's saying to yourself, this is the moment. I need to be here. I need to be available for this. And that's hard sometimes because I want it at 4 p.m. when I'm picking you up from school, and I'm good. I'm fresh. I just had a break. I'm ready. and that's not, sometimes they just were with, and so my son's an introvert. He had just been with people all day. He didn't want to talk to me. He wanted to go in his workshop for a few hours, and
he's peopled out.
He would talk to me.
Yes.
So I think it's remembering that they're human too. And some boys, let me just say, honestly, they are chitter chatters, want to talk about everything. The other thing that does help sometimes is to be the mom who drives carpool, because then you get the other kid in the car, and then you get a lot more like, hey, because they're going to be polite to you. Like the other kid will answer you. And they'll say, well, how was school today? And then you hear a lot more when you get two of them in the car. So I do say the more you can get around all their friends and things, you'll start to learn things and hear things. As far as deprogramming, and this is not something I can say I had as much experience. My kids, I'm so thankful we had a wonderful Christian school and that's where they went. So they were being taught the values we had as well. Although there's always differences, sure. there are always differences. So what I would say the best thing to do in those situations is to be really open for conversation and not lead with fear. Mm-hmm. I think as parents, the thing we think immediately when they come home and they say, well, I don't think that it's wrong for whatever that we think is
fill in the blank. You fill in the blank.
Yeah. Whatever you think is very wrong. And they're like, I think it's totally fine to do whatever. And I think our reaction is to have to prove to them, our natural inclination is to prove to them why that is wrong. I would actually say this is the time in life to slow down and to say, well, tell me why you think that. Tell me where you heard that. That's an interesting thought. So how does that work with blah, 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 blah? Why do you think that? How do you feel like, how does your friend so-and-so think about that? That's always a great way to know what's going on. And who else thinks that? Blah, blah, blah. When you're curious rather than fear, here's what happens. Fear will lead you to control the conversation. Mm. If you can trust the Lord in the moment, if you can be a hopeful parent like this, if you can trust that the Lord is over all of these things. And if you go into it with curiosity, I just want to understand how you're thinking, like you would your next door neighbor who's not a believer, or like you would, someone else. You would never be like, well, let me tell you. Yeah, and try to control it. We're trying to control it because we think we're bad parents if we don't control our kid. That's really not how learning takes place. Be curious, seek to understand. I've just found that diffuses it. But when the kid senses your fear and senses your control, it almost makes it more enticing to them. So I really am a big believer in have the conversation. Yes, teach them what is right and true. Yes, take them to church. Yes, pray. But we can't make our kids believe anything. We can teach, we can train, we can take, but we cannot make. And so I think when you keep that framework in mind, it allows you to be curious and have conversations rather than just think, I've got to change their mind.
Oh, that's freeing too.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't have the answers. Here's the best thing. I'm married to a New Testament professor. Like my husband has a PhD in New Testament. And sometimes our kids have questions about the Bible and he's like, yeah, I don't know the answer to that. And here's the thing. He feels free to say, I don't know, because he's actually studied a lot. Yeah. And I think sometimes those of us who have not studied as much, like me, I do not have a PhD. I feel like, oh, if I don't have the answer, is that going to make them not believe? It's okay to be like, I don't know. We should try to find out together. And so just being curious with them. It's okay that you don't have all the answers about, if somebody comes home and says, well, it seems like the resurrection stories have 3 different accounts or whatever, whatever they might come saying, say, well, that's a good question. I haven't heard that before. Let's research it together. Call your pastor. They normally no one's asking them those questions and they are ready to answer. They're like,
that's a good point.
They're delighted to answer a teenager's question. I can promise you that. They really are, especially about faith and about things like that. They actually know that stuff. And so I think it's just about having conversations. And I do want to tell parents, the studies show that even though it may seem like their friends or their teachers are the greatest impact in their life, you are the greatest impact. The faith that's happening in your home still impacts them more than what's happening in the world. And God can use what the daily habits in your home more greatly than you realize as your children are growing up.
Melissa, that's so beautifully said. And I loved all the freedom that you gave in that. And then also the tangible tips. Like, ask your pastor. He's waiting for you to use that knowledge that he went to school to learn about. Because I know we're quickly running out of time. What are some of your, biggest nuggets that you wish you would have known as a parent of teens? And it's why you wrote this book, obviously. We are in a very secular age. And, it tells us, though, that there's nothing new under the sun. There have been many, many generations of Christians before that have lived with horrendous things some of it's even potentially worse than what we're living through right now. So how would you encourage parents to get those daily habits in? How did you practically day after day weave in the gospel? What are those big takeaways from you?
I think the biggest thing for me as I look back is to say, create the warmest home you can. I heard years ago this advice: light up when your kid walks in a room. And this was to young kids. Let me say this: young kids are actually really cute. 2-year-olds, it's easy to light up. Hey, teenagers sometimes come in the room with an attitude. They sometimes come in grumpy. They sometimes come in and they slam the door. They sometimes come and leave all their junk all over. And what they might hear from you all day is they are not enough. Hey, you left your shoes on the floor again. Hey, your book bag's here. Why is all this? Think about the words you're speaking to your kids and make sure they know every single day, I love you. I love you. Let that be the first thing when they walk in the room, that you light up. Hey, how you doing? So glad to see you. You know, we think sometimes I've got 4 years left with them. I've got to make sure that they believe all the right things about everything. You have 4 last years with them to leave the most deep impression on them that no matter what happens in this life, you love them. That no matter what choices they make, you will always be there for them. And to fill them in every way with the love that is coming to them from Christ through you. And just to make sure that they know that they are deeply loved. Some of the conversations about what they believe, you have a long time to talk through these conversations. But I think they will never forget the love they felt in your home, the unconditional love of Christ that they felt from you. And so that's always my biggest advice.
I love that. And it actually makes me think about, even practically, to build onto that. I'm 38 years old and I still will call my mama sometimes and just be like, hey, we had this conversation at church the other day. What do you think about that? And trust me, we fought like cats and dogs in high school and in college. I was a beast to deal with, bless her heart. And I'm very strong-willed. But I think that goes a long way in saying that I watch her and my dad take us to church every Sunday. I watched them be involved in Sunday school. We got baptized. We saw daily prayer. They put in the time even when I didn't agree with some of their stances, I respect enough that she walks out her personal faith that, at 38 years old, I still want to hear, well, what do you think? Because you might have a better and a deeper interpretation of the Bible than what I have even come to understand yet.
That's right. That's right. And every teenager is going to push back. They're going to
yes.
And right. That means they're a thinking human. Goodness, we want them to push back, right? In some sense, because that's what makes your faith your own. It's when I started pushing back and really pushing in, it actually shows that my faith is alive. So that's not something to squelch. It's actually something to be like, yeah, let's have these conversations. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. You actually made me think about one other question that I had. Me and my girlfriends were talking about this recently, and we were saying how even our little boys are 8. So, we've got some time with them ahead, but we already can feel that they're pulling back a little bit in a healthy way, because they want to emulate their daddy, of course, because he's the man and they love sports. And so he can talk to them about that and watch sports, all those things. How did you, as a mom of boys, stay connected with your boys all throughout? Would you go on independent, date days, you and them? Or did y'all have a rhythm or a routine where you kept that close connection as they were growing up?
Yeah, it's been funny how the Lord did that. It wasn't even anything I planned. I love to garden. And it just so happens that my son does too.
Oh.
And it started by me asking him to drag mulch and soil for me.
Sure.
It started by hard labor, but he likes doing. It's a little easier with your daughters. You go shopping, you do all these things. I don't know, just a little more naturally. But it was really sweet. He loved being in the backyard with me, doing. And so I think it's finding just those places. And then when you find them, just enjoy them together. I was texting him this week because I'm buying an apple tree. And I'm like, do you think this would be a good one or this would be a good one? And he immediately responds.
Oh,
because he loves it. So I think it's learning what they love and trying to share in it. Even if sometimes it's things that we don't know. Like my daughter writes her own music. She sings all these songs. I am the most unmusical person, but I can still be around and cheering her on. So sometimes we connect when we don't even know what they're doing. Like, I don't really know rocket fuel, but I can help, like, I can be excited with them and connect in ways like that. But I do think boys really like activity typically, and doing with them, is great.
I love that. I don't know why this is reminding me of this, but I've been thinking about it through our conversation. Last night, I just saw this reel pop up on my Instagram, and it said that NASA commissioned the study because they wanted to find out how to hire more geniuses. And so they started out by going to schools, and with this one group of kids, they tested kids that were 5 years old, and 95% of them registered as geniuses. 95% of the 5-year-olds. Well, then they came back. I think it was 10 years old, and it had dropped down from 95% of them being geniuses down, dramatically dropped down to 30%. And then everybody almost gave up, this isn't even really worth studying anymore. It's dropping so dramatically. How would we ever know? But then I think one of the researchers was like, no, I'm going to see this through. And he came back when they were in high school, and it was some dismal amount, like what adults are now. We're only 2 or 3% are considered geniuses. And so what the reel was saying is that, unfortunately, the school system is actually just going to train them yes, just believe whatever we teach you. Don't think through for yourself. Just become a good worker. Yes, it's so on and so forth. That's how it was designed in the beginning, unfortunately, in our culture. And so I think that every opportunity you have to be outside with your kids, like we were saying earlier, to garden with your kids. And like you were saying, instead of showing them, I'm so scared, I don't know what to do that you think this way. Oh my gosh. It's no, when you engage them from a gospel perspective and get curious with them, you're actually encouraging the genius in them to stay alive. And so that was so timely that God let me see that reel. And then we had this conversation today.
I know.
I'm encouraged.
I know. I love it. I love it. And it's just, it's just you're sharing life together. And so he saw I had a hobby I loved, and he joined in. I think sometimes as parents, we think we only join in the other way. We go cheer them on in the sidelines. Well, sometimes they actually like when we have lives, and they come cheer us on in some sense. And then now he loves it. He grew corn in our backyard. I mean, literally grew the corn, and then made his own grits. He wanted to understand where grits came from. So he then shucked the corn, cooked the corn, dried the corn, and made his own grits and made his own cornmeal. Yeah, because he's just curious. And
that's so cool.
Great. We want to have curious kids. So
we do. Well, if you guys are listening to this and you're interested in that whole theory and that whole thought process about the school, y'all need to go back and listen to Matt Beaudreau's episode. I'll link that down in the show notes. And I also have so many resources on my website about sensory activities and ways to engage your kids and ideas. So I'll link all those down below, as well as our favorite family devotionals. But as we are running out of time, do us a favor, Melissa, tell everybody where they can connect with you online, any free resources that you have for them, as well as your books. Where can they get all that stuff?
Great. Yeah, you can connect with me at melissabkruger.com. I also write at the Gospel Coalition, so I'm there. If you want to connect in person, we have a huge conference this summer. It's our TGC National Women's Conference. It's very, very fun. Topics on everything under the sun. And that's June 20th through the 22nd of 24. So, and that can be, you can find that at TGC, any of that information there. Yeah. And yes, we have free resources like prayer guides and things like that. You can find it at my website, just because one of the best things we can always do no matter what is pray. And the Lord hears us and he answers, and we can trust him. And I mean, that is our biggest hope as we parent with hope.
Amen. That's so funny that you said that specifically, because a Bible study I went to yesterday was all about, Lord, open our ears to hear. And this morning when I woke up, I literally I don't know if it's something about coming out of a dream or God waking you up in the middle of the night. But for some reason, I feel like God speaks to me the most when I'm in bed or when I'm first waking up or what have you. And this morning I felt almost like a whisper in my ear, pray for Leighton and Finn right now. And I felt convicted. I was like, Lord, I don't pray enough for my kids. I pray selfishly, or I pray about the podcast, or I pray for my listeners, or I pray for Eric. But a lot of times, other than praying with the boys at night, I don't think that I do a great job of specifically praying for how I want the Lord to grow them and their relationship with the Lord. So I felt really convicted of that. And Melissa, if you don't mind, I went on that really long tailspin to say, do you mind praying in close for the women that are listening to this that want to raise children after Christ's heart?
I am glad to. Let's pray.
Awesome.
Father, I thank you that we can come before you and cry out on behalf of our kids. And I know that the teen years can be full of so much hard as they are developing, as we are developing as parents. So Lord, I pray that you would guide us. I pray that your word would lead us. And Lord, we pray that your spirit would give us wisdom that we desperately need. Lord, I pray for every woman listening, whatever stage of mothering or parenting that she is in, or grandparenting, Lord, that you would give her wisdom and insight and encouragement today. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Melissa. What a joy. You guys, if you will do me a favor and please take a screenshot of this episode, share it with another mama that you are in the thick of the parenting battle with. We are all mama bears out there doing the best that we can and really trying to point our kids to Jesus, and in mind, body, and spirit, trying to learn more and more about how we can be better moms, better wives, and just honestly, amazing kingdom women. So if you think this podcast could bless someone else, please send it their way. I know that me and Melissa would love to connect with them on Instagram if you want to send them over there to chat with us too. But I hope y'all have a blessed day, and I'll see you next time. Okay, friend, that's a wrap on this week's episode. If you're not already following me on Instagram, make sure to screenshot this episode, share it to your stories, and tag @Healthy by Heather Brown so I can connect with you in my DMs. It truly brings me so much joy to see how these episodes impact you. Make sure to subscribe so we can see you back here next Tuesday for our weekly show. In case you don't know, your downloads, ratings, and reviews are the actual lifeblood of this podcast, and it helps spread the word to your friends and family. So please hit the download button on this episode and leave a 5-star rating if you super loved it. And if we're really BFFs, you'll spread the happy and text this podcast link to someone who needs to hear it today for some encouragement. Scroll down to the show notes on this episode to see any and all links mentioned, freebies to fuel your health goals, prayer-related episodes, and the 7-day free trial of my exclusive membership where I personally coach and cheer you on in whole health. While you're there, make sure to check out my Amazon storefront with healthy snacks, my favorite look for less workout outfits, and books and devotionals that challenge me in my faith. If you ever need to find my Amazon storefront, just Google Healthy by Heather Brown Amazon and it will come up. Have a great day, Girl Gang.